Check out this handsome little fella, the Pentax P30. Also known as the P3 in some parts of the world, it is a very basic yet powerful 35mm SLR. The body is made of mostly plastic and plastic coated metal. This makes it lightweight. It's well built to Pentax usual standards, so it doesn't feel flimsy at all. The Pentax P30 has 3 operating modes: metered manual, programmed auto exposure, and programmed auto flash. This copy of the P30 came with a Pentax A 50mm f2 lens. I have also seen copies with f1.7 or even f1.4 kit lenses. The lens is mounted by aligning the red dots on the lens and the mount of the camera body and rotating clockwise. The lens is removed by pressing the lens lock release lever and rotating counterclockwise. The lens has a low profile but extends slightly outwards when focusing on close subjects. The focusing ring is smooth, nicely textured, and has a distance scale for guidance. The other ring is the aperture ring. The aperture ranges from f2 to f22 with half stops between f2.8 and f11. There is an A setting right after f22. This is how the programmed auto exposure mode is selected. By pressing down the aperture auto lock release button and rotating the ring to the A setting, the camera goes to programmed auto exposure mode, regardless of what the shutter speed is set to. The same button releases the aperture ring, so any aperture could be selected in metered manual mode. All focusing is done at the maximum aperture opening, f2 in this case, but the P30 has a preview lever which lets you view the composition at the selected aperture, for compatible lenses of course. The shutter speeds range from 1 second to 1/1000th of a second, including bulb. This is selected via the shutter speed dial in metered manual mode. There is also a 1/100th of a second speed for flash sync. The shutter release button on this copy is not threaded. However, later copies of the P30 actually have a threaded shutter release button apparently. Pressing the shutter release button halfway down turns the light meter on, making the exposure information viewable in the viewfinder. Pressing it further down, of course, takes the shot. The shutter is electromagnetic, so it is battery dependent. It will not fire without batteries, or with the camera turned off. Talking of which, the camera is turned on via the on-off switch on the other side of the camera right next to the rewind lever. The on-off switch is also how the self-timer is turned on, by pressing the timer button and sliding the switch until ST is visible. The self-timer gives you about 12 seconds to run into the frame and be part of the photo, if that's what you're trying to achieve. Pulling the rewind lever upwards pops the back of the camera open and exposes the film chamber. Loading film in the P30 is an absolute breeze. There is no need to set the ISO because the camera can read the DX code on the film. If there is no DX code on the film, the ISO is defaulted to 100 speed. So the only non-DX film usable correctly is a 100 speed film. Unless of course you use a 200 or 400 non-DX speed film on purpose, this would effectively be pulling the film. Closing the back of the camera resets the frame counter, which is right next to the film advance lever. The film advance lever can be set to the standoff angle if you are anticipating taking many shots concurrently. Otherwise, it can be returned to its resting position after each shot. When the film is done, it is rewound by first pressing the film rewind button underneath the camera and then turning the rewind crank counterclockwise. Composing a photograph with the P30 is through the viewfinder. Depending on what mode you're in, what you see in the viewfinder has a slightly different meaning. In manual mode, which is metered, the camera lets you select any available aperture or shutter speed setting, but it suggests what shutter speed you should be at for correct exposure. So, in metered manual mode, an M is displayed along with two shutter speeds, the actual shutter speed selected by you and the camera suggested speed. It is up to you to agree or disagree. In programmed auto exposure mode, a P is displayed along with one shutter speed, which is the shutter speed that is selected by the camera. There is no indication of what aperture has been selected. A blinking 1 means risk of underexposure, while a blinking 1000 means the opposite. The LEDs also serve as battery check. They only light up, of course, if there are non-dead batteries loaded. If the batteries are low, the LEDs will blink about once every second. There are 3 focusing aids: split image, microprism, and a matte finish. My preferred aid is the split image. I haven't really used the third shooting mode, but it is available, the program auto flash mode. There is a hot shoe for mounting your flash. Pentax recommends that you use one of the dedicated flashes for this camera. The light meter works through the lens, so there is no need to compensate for filters. Unfortunately, there is no exposure compensation dial. There is a handy exposure memory lock button which you can use to take exposure, keep it pressed, recompose the frame and take the picture at the originally measured exposure. The said light meter, as well as the shutter mechanism, are battery operated. 2 LR44 batteries are required and they go in the battery compartment at the bottom of the camera. Right. In my opinion, the Pentax P30 is 2 simple cameras in one. A manual focus point and shoot camera for the person who doesn't want to concern themselves with exposure settings. 2. A manual camera for someone who wants to learn the ins and outs of photo exposure but with a helping hand. In terms of photos, yet again, like any SLR, it mostly depends on several factors. The lens, the quality of the light, and the photographer's skill, of course. And being a Pentax, there is a huge range of lenses for that K-mount, so you can't go wrong there. It does, however, provide everything one needs for everyday photography, and a little bit more. It's not as smooth as the Pentax ME Super, or as small as the Olympus OM1, sure, but it is lightweight and relatively unobtrusive, especially being all black. Someone who enjoys using an SLR for street photography may like this one, especially in full auto mode. It's manual focus though, but I guess one could use zone focusing to focus and get in the zone. Until next time, Babini Mangidem.